You're not behind because you're lazy. You're not broke because you're unlucky. You're exactly where the people around you expected you to be, and the worst part is, you helped them put you there. That's not an insult. It's a pattern. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Think about where you are right now. You've watched the videos, you've read some of the books, you probably have a list somewhere of things you're going to do. But somehow, every Monday looks a lot like the last one. The income hasn't moved. And the explanation you keep reaching for is that you haven't found the right strategy yet. But that's not the real problem. The real problem is invisible, and Machiavelli spotted it 500 years ago. What's up, guys? Today we're going inside one of the most brutal and least understood frameworks ever written about wealth and power. Machiavelli's 7-step system isn't a hustle guide. It isn't a productivity hack. It's a map out of a psychology that was built to keep you exactly where you are. Most people think the path to wealth starts with finding the right skill, the right opportunity, or the right market. Machiavelli said none of those things come first. He said the real war happens inside your identity before it ever shows up in your bank account. Here's what that actually means. Research on long-term behavioral change suggests something almost too simple to believe. People rarely act their way into new identities. They adopt the identity first, and behavior follows. The action comes after the belief. That's the invisible wall most people keep hitting. They're trying to build a wealthy life while still operating with the psychology of someone who survives paycheck to paycheck. Machiavelli called this virtue, not virtue in the moral sense, but the raw capacity to shape uncertain circumstances through force of will. He believed every person carried this. But potential without a deliberate identity shift is just noise. You have to decide who you are before the world ever reflects it back to you. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. The moment you make that decision, the moment you actually start thinking longer term, speaking differently, aiming at something bigger, the people closest to you will not celebrate it. Some will joke. Some will go quiet. Most will do something even harder to defend against. They'll be subtly, consistently discouraging without ever saying a critical word out loud. This is not a personal failure. It's documented social behavior. Sociologist Nicholas Christakis at Harvard published research showing that behaviors and expectations spread through social networks the same way a contagion does. The people 3 degrees away from you, people you have never met, are statistically influencing your decision. Which means your current financial ceiling is not entirely about you. You cannot individually outgrow a group ceiling while staying inside the group. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote that rulers collapse through weak alliances, and he wasn't talking about business partnerships. He was describing who you allow to define your daily standard of normal. This is why separation isn't arrogance, it's arithmetic. But here's the part nobody talks about: separation without replacement is just isolation with a better story. The move isn't to walk away from people and sit alone with your goals. The move is to consciously rebuild your input environment. What you read, what you listen to, whose thinking reaches you first. In Renaissance Florence, ambitious young men didn't simply leave their villages. They apprenticed under masters. They placed themselves in proximity to people already operating at the level they wanted to reach, not to network, not to impress anyone, but to let a different standard of normal become their new floor. The modern version is less romantic, but just as effective. Paid rooms, conferences, masterminds. The uncomfortable investment that makes every protective instinct in you scream to stay home. And this is where Machiavelli wrote something most people misread. He said that fortune is like a woman, and if you want to master her, you must approach her boldly. People hear recklessness. That's not it. He was describing what you're willing to risk before you feel ready. The instinct to wait for certainty is precisely what fortune punishes. The investment that terrifies you is usually the one that forces you to grow. Most people stop here. Don't. Because the psychological shift and the environmental shift are only 2/3 of the equation. The piece most self-improvement content skips because it doesn't sound inspiring enough is this. Mahonde, you have to measure everything. Researcher Gabriele Oettingen at New York University spent years studying why positive visualization so often backfires. Her finding dreaming without contrast, without a clear measured gap between where you are and where you need to be, triggers premature satisfaction. The brain starts behaving as if you've already arrived. And when you feel like you've arrived, you stop moving. So instead of saying you want to be wealthy someday, you reverse engineer it. $1 million broken down to its daily arithmetic becomes a completely different kind of goal. It becomes a decision made at 7 in the morning, not a wish made at midnight. Every rejected pitch, every slow month, every idea that didn't land becomes data, not proof that you don't belong. And the system that multiplies all of it, the final skill that separates the people who build from the ones who stay stuck, is persuasion. Machiavelli once wrote that men are driven primarily by love or fear. He wrote that as a political observation. But it is actually a description of every transaction that has ever taken place between two human beings. Every sale, every investment, every conversation that ended with someone saying yes. Most people treat persuasion like a personality trait, something you either have or you don't. Machiavelli treated it as a craft, a deliberate skill built on understanding what the other person actually wants beneath what they say they want. And it starts with something most people skip, fully believing in what you're offering before you ask anyone else to believe it. Doubt leaks. It leaks through tone, through hesitation, through the fraction of a second before you make the ask. The committed voice sounds different, not louder, just certain. And certainty, in any conversation about money or opportunity, is its own form of leverage. This is the arc Machiavelli was mapping across centuries of observation. Identity before circumstance. Environment rebuilt deliberately. Every goal measured, not wished for. Persuasion as the multiplier on top of it all. Not a shortcut, a sequence. One that compounds quietly for years before anyone on the outside can explain what happened. The people who actually use this won't talk about it much. They'll just start moving differently, and one day, the distance between them and where they started will look like luck to everyone who watched but never moved. If this hit differently than the content you usually scroll past, it was supposed to. This is Vertex Vision. Every video here goes deeper into psychology, power, and the patterns that separate the people who build from the ones who watch. Subscribe if that's the room you want to be in. And if this was worth your time, the like button is how you tell the algorithm to find someone else who needs it.